If you've been itching to watch teenage fairy angst, then hey, your wait is over. Fate, the Winx Saga, is back for a second season, so cast your spells. Let's dive in. School's back in session under the militant authority of Alfea's former headmistress Rosalind. With the burned ones gone, Dowling disappeared, and Silva imprisoned for treason, the Alfea of last year has grown up with new magic, new romances, and new faces. But when fairies start to go missing in the night, Bloom and her Suitemates discover a dangerous threat lurking in the shadows, one they'll have to stop before it wreaks havoc on the entire Otherworld. We're still following Bloom and the rest of the gang, but the new complication for Bloom is that at the end of Season 1, she discovered, or at least she unleashed, the Dragon Flame, meaning that she is one of the most powerful fairies in the world. But because this is all new to her, her magic can be a massive liability. Now, just like in the first season, there is an antagonistic force that's threatening the safety of the school, and really the magic world as a whole. These threats at first are very vague and they're mysterious, but then as the show goes along, we do get sufficient development to understand what's going on, and then can actually look at them as a real threat. I think the show is hoping that nobody's going to notice, but Rosalind has a casting change for this season. The new Rosalind is played by Miranda Richardson, and I loved just the wicked, biting sarcasm and the way that she doesn't take any crap from anybody that she brings. Now, Richardson is fun to watch. I mean, if for no other reason, then she's great when she's grumpy. Now, I've mentioned that there are a bunch of horny hookups this season, and really, we see the show taking on a more mature stance just all the way through. There's a character arc that's been quietly building, and while we may have suspected something with this character, it's now confirmed. And I love the way that the show handled this aspect, and then how the surrounding characters responded. It was touching and it was sweet, but it also fit really well within the narrative, and then it came about at the right time without feeling forced or rushed. Now, I was seriously surprised at how invested I was in this season. I mean, when some of the climactic moments came, and there were several that were spread out across the 7 episodes, I found myself very sucked into the drama and those character moments. There's one that involves Bloom and another character in the first half of the season, and I like how it caught me off guard. And then, even when the reveal came, I was still uncertain if it was actually true and happening. And this was fun, and it showed me how much I was drawn into the drama, even though I had been sort of fighting it. And there's another climactic scene as the show moves into the final act, and not only was I surprised by the outcome, but I was chuckling to myself at just how much I was caring about the story. And don't get me wrong, I wasn't going into this to actively hate it or anything like that, but I just wasn't terribly invested in that first season, so I didn't have huge expectations for this one. I like that there are some real consequences to the actions this season. Characters are put into danger, and because of how the stakes have been defined by the story, the threats have weight to them, making the scenarios engaging and enjoyable. But, come on, this isn't a perfect show. There are several things that irked me as it went along. The back and forth of characters not wanting to either talk or listen to others, it does get tiresome. Now, to have some scenes of that feels realistic, but when a character refuses to listen to others, then gets themselves into all sorts of trouble for not listening, and then in another scenario doesn't listen again and gets into trouble again, that's bothersome and frustrating. Now, some of the angst gets to be overly dramatic too, and it's not just from the younger cast. We get moodiness from adults that I thought was laughable and then very soap opera-ish. And then there's the special effects. Now, sometimes these are convincing. When Bloom will use her powers, the flames look mostly good. But there are times when things are on fire, and those, they don't have a convincing quality to them at all. But I do love it when the eyes of the fairies will glow in the color that represents their power. Like take, for instance, we'll watch Musa's eyes glow purple anytime she's channeling her or somebody else's emotions. And this happens a lot in the show for many different characters, and I like how it's used as a subtle clue as to what power is in play and then what it may mean for a character. Now, while there is a small amount of cheese to this, and I'm not really knocking that because I actually expect some cheese, and I really would have been disappointed if it hadn't existed within the storytelling, but there's a point in the final climax that involves several of our fairies. Now, this sequence was ridiculous and laughable. I know what they were going for, but it broke me completely out of the mood that the story had worked so hard to establish. We're having this really climactic and dangerous moment, and then we just have these people doing interpretive dance in the air. The visuals didn't fit the part of the story arc at all. I mentioned that there are 7 episodes in this, and that's one up from the first season where there were only 6, and each of these are around 50-ish minutes long. Now, most of the time these didn't drag, other than to have some of the repetitiveness that I'd mentioned with the lack of listening skills. Now, there was enough drama to keep it moving and not get bogged down, but throughout the entire show, small bits here and there could be trimmed to cut down on the overall time, but also then to remove some of the unnecessary brooding that a few of the characters go through. Now, the season is kind of 50-50 for me. I like most of the story arcs and enjoyed several of the character progressions, but then there are other characters like Riven or even Andreas that were almost one note and flat with very little dynamics to their presentation. The repetitive parts are bothersome and there is a lot of predictability, but then there are also surprises that the story manages to unveil that were enjoyable and engaging. And then within the climactic moments, while they're intriguing from a story perspective, they're revealed and they're resolved rather quickly instead of drawing out the drama of that reveal for maximum effectiveness. I think if you were a fan of the first season, you're going to enjoy this one even more as it delves more into the lore of Alfea and then really allows some characters to showcase their magic. Plus, the increased maturity of the storytelling and the content is going to be more appealing to a broader audience rather than having another tame season. And then, with the way that this concludes, there is room for a continuation, so fans should be able to look forward to more. There's sex, no nudity, a lot of profanity, and a bunch of violence. I give Season 2 of Fate, the Winx Saga, 3 out of 5 couches. Do you have a favorite character in the show? Now, I really enjoyed both Terra and Musa's storylines this season, but let me know who you root for in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me. And you would not believe how hard it is to say bloom. I kept saying broom, and